The mask comes off, and for the first time in 23 years, a dying man looks at his son with his own eyes. Not the black lenses, not the respirator's flat mechanical breath. Just a pale, scarred, exhausted human face, wet-eyed, asking to be seen. Let me look on you with my own eyes. That's the whole redemption of Darth Vader right there. A man who choked the life out of younglings and cracked a planet's population under his boot. And in his last minutes, he throws his own master down a reactor shaft to save one person. The most feared being in the galaxy, undone by love in the span of a single scene. Here's the part nobody sits with long enough. It cost him everything. He walked back into the light and he died doing it. The return and the price were the same act. You couldn't separate them if you tried. Now hold that image because I want to put something ugly right next to it. There's another Jedi in this saga who touched the dark side, pulled back and walked away. Kept his hands, kept his mind, kept his life. Paid, as far as anyone can measure, almost nothing. And we use the exact same word for both of them. Both returned. Both came back from the dark side. One of them gave his life. The other one flinched and went home. That should bother you. It bothers me. Because if the word redemption covers a man who dies for it and a man who barely singes his fingers, then the word is useless. Unless there's a scale underneath it, a real one, a price tag on every single Jedi who ever fell and clawed their way back. There is, and Yoda spent his whole life insisting it couldn't exist. To understand what Anakin's way out actually cost, to understand why his is the most expensive name on the list, you first have to understand why the Jedi believed there was no way out at all, why the door only opens one direction. And once we know the rule, we can start counting who broke it and what they left behind to do it. Some of them paid with a moment of shame. Some paid with a limb, a memory, a mind. One of them didn't pay at all, and that's the one that breaks everything. Once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. Consume you, it will. Yoda says it on Dagobah, swamp mud up to his knees, and he isn't offering an opinion. He's stating what the Jedi treat as physical law. Not the dark side is tempting, not it's a hard habit to break. Forever, a one-way door. Step through and the destination is fixed. You belong to it now. And you have to understand why they believed that, because it's not superstition. The dark side works. That's the trap. Yoda admits it in the same breath. It's quicker, easier, more seductive. Anger, fear, aggression. They don't just corrupt you, they make you stronger right now, immediately. Reach for the light and you get discipline, patience, years of it. Reach for the dark and you get a jolt of raw power the second you're angry enough to want it. So the dark side pays you to stay. Every time you use it, it hands you a reason not to leave. That's the mechanism. It's a hook baited with exactly the thing that got you there. Which means the Jedi weren't being dramatic. From where they stood, a fallen Jedi wasn't a patient to be treated. He was a loss to be mourned. You don't come back because the thing you'd have to give up is the thing making you strong. And nobody walks away from their own strength. Here's where it gets complicated, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't. There are two versions of this galaxy. In the older stories, the ones we now call legends, everything before Disney redrew the map, coming back was rarer but built into the lore as a real mechanical possibility. In the current canon, it's rarer still and it costs more and it almost never comes clean. Keep that split in your head. It matters more than once in this video because sometimes the two versions disagree about whether a man was even saved at all. So if Yoda's right, if the door really only opens one way, then everyone I'm about to name is impossible. Every one of them did a thing the Force says can't be done. And they didn't all pay the same. That's the spine of this whole thing. There's a price and it runs on a scale, and I want you to hold it in your mind for the next 20 minutes because we're climbing it one rung at a time. At the bottom, you flinched. You touched the dark, felt the heat, and pulled your hand back before it took anything. You paid with a bad night's sleep and a memory you don't like. One rung up, you paid with a deed. One decisive act, a life saved, a master betrayed, a blade you refused to swing, bought your way back. Real, but paid in a single installment. Higher, you paid with your body or your bond to the Force itself. The dark left a mark that never healed. A piece of you it kept even after you reached the light again. And at the top, the two most expensive currencies there are. Your mind. You came back, but not whole, not sane, not sure who you are anymore. Or your life. The return and the death arriving in the same instant. the way they did for the man behind the mask. Anakin, by the way, sits on that scale twice. Remember that. He'll pay at the very bottom and the very top, and he's the only one who does both. But we don't start with him. We start at the bottom of the ladder, with the man the whole galaxy calls the greatest redemption story ever told. And I'm going to try to convince you he may never have fallen at all. Watch the greatest redemption in Star Wars and count how long the fall lasts. Go on, time it. Luke Skywalker, throne room, second Death Star. The Emperor is needling him. Vader is hunting his sister in his thoughts, and something snaps. Luke comes off the steps swinging, and it's not the careful swordsman from earlier, it's fury. He drives Vader down, hammers at him, and hacks the hand clean. Then the Emperor purrs his approval, and Luke stops. He looks down at Vader's sparking severed wrist. Then he turns his own hand over. The black glove, the machinery under it, his father's hand and his own, the same wound, the same road. How long did the fall last? 15 seconds? Maybe 20. Long enough to win the duel with rage. And then he throws the lightsaber away. I am a Jedi, like my father before me. He'd rather die than take the last step. So here's my problem, and I'll say it plainly. I don't think Luke fell. I think he leaned. He looked over the edge, felt his own weight start to tip, and caught himself on the railing. What did it cost him? A jolt of shame. A memory he doesn't like. That's the bottom rung. That's the cheapest return on the board. And I already know some of you are furious right now. Luke Skywalker, the moral center of the whole saga, filed under barely counts? Good. Hold that anger. Don't let go of it. By the end of this, you're going to have a rule for who really came back and who just got scared straight. And I want you to test Luke against it yourself and see if I'm right or if you are. He's not alone down here. Ezra Bridger does almost the same thing, slower and with more temptation baked in. On Malachor, he opens a Sith holocron. You have to give in to the dark side to make the thing work, and he does, reaching for a shortcut to power because the light isn't winning fast enough. For a stretch of Rebels, he's colder, sharper, quicker to reach for force instead of finesse. But he pulls out, Kanan drags him back, and the holocron gets shut. Ezra paid a little more than Luke. He actually used the thing, actually let it in. But the currency's the same. Fear, a lesson. A door he opened and then had the sense to close. Nobody lost a hand they'd keep. Nobody lost a mind. A second saved both of them. That's the thing about the bottom rung. The price is low because the timing was lucky. They caught themselves. The next ones didn't have a second to spare. For them, catching yourself wasn't enough. You had to do something. Pay in full, in a single act, or you didn't come back at all. A blade raised over a helpless enemy. A choice, held for one long second. And then the blade comes down, into the dirt, not the throat. That's Barriss Offee, and to understand why that moment matters, you have to remember where she started and how far down she went. She was a healer, gentle, principled, one of the more thoughtful young Jedi of her generation. And then she looked at the Clone Wars and decided the Jedi Order had become the thing it claimed to fight. An army of warriors calling themselves keepers of peace. She wasn't entirely wrong, and that's what made her dangerous. She bombed the Jedi Temple, she framed her own friend Ahsoka Tano, and let her stand trial for murder. She stood in a courtroom and spat her contempt at the Order to its face. That's not a lean over the edge, that's a fall, all the way down, cold and deliberate. The old story ended there. For years, Barriss was just gone, arrested, condemned, a cautionary tale with no second act. Then the current canon went back and reopened her file. Tales of the Empire 2024 picks her up years later, surviving under the Empire she helped make possible. Trained now as an Inquisitor, one of the Emperor's Jedi hunters. Rock bottom under rock bottom. And it's there, at the lowest point, that she gets her one act. Ordered to execute, hunting alongside another Inquisitor, she reaches the moment where the blade goes up, and she won't do it. She refuses the kill. She turns on what she'd become and walks away from it, choosing to protect instead of hunt. I want to be careful here because the fandom fights about this one, and the fight is fair. This isn't a clean, triumphant return to the light with robes and a lightsaber and a seat back on the council. Canon shows her taking one step off the path, not completing the journey. Whether that's redemption or just a single flicker of conscience is genuinely up for debate. The story leaves it deliberately unfinished. But by our scale, she did the thing the bottom rung Jedi never had to. Luke flinched and it was over. Barriss had to act. act. She had to raise a blade and choose with her own hand not to swing it. She paid with a deed. That's the rung above shame. You don't get back with a feeling. You get back with a decision that cost you something to make. But at least it was her deed. At least she paid her own bill.
Because there's a case where a Jedi fell, and fell hard, and clawed his way back to the light, and the price was paid by someone else entirely. He returned whole. She didn't return at all. He fell. She died. He's the one who came back. Sit with how wrong that is for a second, because it's the cruelest arithmetic on this entire list. Quinlan Vos was a Jedi Master with a gift that was also a loophole. Psychometry, the ability to read the history of anything he touched. The Council handed him a mission that would have made any of them flinch. Get close to Asajj Ventress, Dooku's discarded assassin, and use her to get close enough to kill Count Dooku himself. A Jedi, sanctioned by the Order, sent to commit an assassination. That's the setup of Dark Disciple, Canon, Christie Golden's novel, built from unproduced Clone Wars scripts, so this is George Lucas's writer's room, not a side story. And it goes exactly as badly as you'd fear. To get close to Ventress, Vos has to live in her world, and her world is the dark side, and she teaches it to him the way you teach someone to swim by pushing them off a dock. He's good at it, that's the horror of it. He takes to the dark like he was made for it. Somewhere in there, the mission stops being a cover. He falls, really falls. By the end, he's serving Dooku, turned, a Jedi in a Sith's shadow, and Ventress, the assassin, the villain, the one who is supposed to be the corrupting influence, is the one standing in the light, watching the man she loves disappear into the thing she used to be. Here's the reversal that guts me every time. She's the one who saves him, not the Order, not his own conscience clawing back the way Luke's did. When the moment comes and Dooku's lightning is about to end Vos for good, Asajj Ventress throws herself in front of it. The former Sith apprentice dies, taking the blow meant for the fallen Jedi. And it's her death, the shock of it, the grief of it, that snaps him out of the dark and back into himself. So tally it up on our scale. What did Quinlan Vos pay to return? Grief, guilt, a wound that won't close. But he kept his hands, his mind, his life, his place. The full price, the everything, was paid by the person who had the least reason to pay it. The villain redeemed the hero by dying for him. That's the ugliest truth the scale keeps surfacing. Sometimes the cost of a return isn't billed to the one who fell. Somebody else covers it. Vos walked out of the dark side whole. That's the part I keep circling back to. Whole. Because from here on, nobody does. Every name left leaves a piece of themselves behind, and the first one is going to make you ask a question I've been dodging on purpose. What if you never fully fell? Does clawing back even count? Where exactly is the line? At what point does tempted become fallen and clawing back become a real return instead of just a bad weekend? I've been drawing that line confidently for 6 names now. Ahsoka Tano is where it stops being easy, because she never fell. Not the way Barriss did, not the way Vos did. There's no scene where Ahsoka Tano serves a Sith or slaughters the innocent. And yet leaving her out feels like cheating, because almost nobody in this saga has walked closer to the dark and come away more changed. She just did it from the outside in. Start with the wound the Order gave her. Barriss framed her, the Jedi Council abandoned her to a military tribunal, and even when she was cleared and invited back, Ahsoka looked at the institution that had thrown her away and said no. She walked out, not to the dark side, to nothing. No order, no master, no name to hide behind. That's its own kind of fall, the quiet kind. The dark side isn't the only way to lose your place in the light. Sometimes you just stop belonging. Then the current canon does something stranger with her. In the world between worlds, that impossible corridor outside time in Rebels, Ahsoka reaches back through history and pulls her own dying self out of a duel with Darth Vader. The duel where she'd finally faced what Anakin became and refused to leave him, and it nearly killed her for it. She stares into the man her master turned into, the living proof that the greatest of them fell all the way. And it doesn't break her, it tempers her. So what did the dark side cost Ahsoka Tano? Not a limb, not her mind. It cost her the thing she was supposed to be, the Jedi she was raised to become. She survived contact with the pit by never quite falling in, and she walked away from the light on her own terms rather than being dragged from it. Whether that even belongs on a redemption list is a fair fight, and I'll let you have it. But she's the gate, because she's the last one who comes through clean. Everyone from here down paid with something they never got back. Ahsoka walked up to the edge and kept her body, her mind, herself.
The next man walked back into the light, and the Force took a piece of him it never returned. He spent the rest of his life able to feel the light and never able to touch it again. 4,000 years before Luke ever threw his lightsaber away, another Jedi fell and paid a price so specific, so surgical, that death would almost have been kinder. This one's deep in the Legends timeline, the old expanded universe from before Disney reset the board, so treat it as its own galaxy running on its own rules. But it's worth the trip because qel-droma answers a question the modern films never dare to ask. What if you come all the way back and the Force still won't take you? Ulic was a Jedi Knight who thought he was clever. Sound familiar? He decided the only way to destroy a Sith cult from within was to join it, walk into the dark on purpose, earn their trust, and gut them from the inside. The Council warned him. He went anyway, and the dark side did what it always does to people who think they can wear it like a costume. It stopped being a costume. He rose through the cult. He became a Sith Lord. He led armies against his own, and in the worst moment of the whole fall, he killed his own brother's mentor, and in a duel gone wrong, struck down his closest friend. By the end, there was nothing clever left in him, just a warlord who'd talked himself into hell one reasonable step at a time. His return isn't a lightning bolt of love the way Anakin's is. It's slower, sadder, more like a man waking up in a house he burned down. He turns on his dark masters. He helps the Jedi in the war he helped start. He comes back. And here's the price, the reason I put him this high. A Jedi named Nomi Sunrider does something almost nobody in these stories can do. She severs him from the Force, cuts the connection at the root. Not as punishment exactly, as the only way to stop him. Ulic qel-droma returns to the light a redeemed man, and he spends every remaining day of his life deaf to the thing that had defined him since childhood. He can see other Jedi touch the Force. He remembers what it felt like, and he will never feel it again. Think about what that actually is. He kept his mind. He kept his life. He got his soul back. And the Force, the one thing he'd have traded any of that to keep, was the exact thing taken from him as the cost of coming home. He lived out his years as a man who could stand in a room full of light and not touch a single ray of it. And then he died protecting others, a hermit, mostly forgotten. He lost the Force, but he kept himself. Hold on to that distinction, because it's about to invert. The next one's kept the Force and lost the person who was holding it. The Jedi didn't save him. That's the polite version. What they actually did was reach into his skull and erase the man he was, then build a new one on top of the wreckage and tell it that it was somebody else. His name was Revan, and his story is the one that turns this whole video from a redemption countdown into something closer to a horror film. Legends again, old Knights of the Old Republic canon, another galaxy, another set of rules, but the idea in it is so disturbing it's worth every second. Revan was the greatest of his generation. He led the Republic's armies through a war so brutal it broke half the Jedi who fought in it, and then he did what the Order feared most. He won, went looking for the enemy's source of power, found it, and it turned him. He came back not as a hero, but as a Sith Lord, and he brought a fleet with him to burn down the Republic he just saved. They couldn't beat him in the open. So they did something worse. When he was finally captured, gravely wounded, the Jedi didn't imprison him, and they didn't execute him. They took his mind apart. They wiped Revan, the memories, the identity, the entire person, and rebuilt a docile, obedient new personality in the empty space. A loyal servant of the Order who had no idea the monster he used to be was buried a few inches under his own thoughts. That's the redemption. Read it again. A fallen Jedi was brought back to the light by having the fallen Jedi surgically deleted. The thing that returned to the light was, in a real sense, a different man wearing the first one's face, and haunted all through the story by fragments and flashes of a self he was never supposed to remember. He came back. He was never whole again. He couldn't be. Wholeness would have meant remembering who he was, and who he was is exactly what they killed to save him. And he's not even the only mind on this rung. Basta Lashan, the Jedi who helped capture him, falls herself before the story's done. Broken under torture and the Sith's slow pressure, turned against everything she believed. What pulls her back isn't the Order and isn't willpower, it's her bond to Revan, the love that grew between them in the wreckage. She claws back to the light through the one connection they never managed to sever. She keeps her mind, but only just, and only because someone reached in and held onto her while it was coming apart.
This is the rung where coming back stops being a triumph and starts being a wound that never closes. You return, but you don't get peace. The dark side lets go of your body and keeps a room inside your head. So that's the top of the scale as I've built it. Shame, deed, body, mind. To come back, you pay with a piece of yourself, and the deeper you fell, the bigger the piece. Except, there's one who fell and came back and paid none of it.
No shame that cost him, no severed limb, no wiped mind, no life traded on the spot. He just came home, clean. And that single exception doesn't sit on the scale, it breaks it. Turn the whole thing around for a second. What if the most complete return in the entire saga is the one that costs the least? And that's not a flaw in him, it's a flaw in the scale. Ben Solo, Kylo Ren, the boy who murdered his own father on a bridge and then at the very end walked all the way back into the light and gave his life inside of 5 minutes of screen time. With no severed limb, no wiped mind, no order extracting payment. He just decided. And half of you are already typing. I know the objection because it's the right one. Ben Solo doesn't count. He was never a Jedi. He never finished the training. You can't put him on a list of fallen Jedi. Hold that thought. Don't scroll past it. Sharpen it, because it's the exact argument that makes him the most important name here. He's the stress test.
If our scale is real, it should tell us what to do with him. Let's see if it can. Watch the actual return. On the bridge, his father Han comes to him one last time. Not a force ghost, not a vision, just memory. Just a son remembering a voice. Ben. And later, Rey, who has every reason to let him die, reaches across their bonds and heals him instead. That's the mechanism. Not fear the way it saved Luke. Not a corpse the way it saved Voss. Not a mind wipe the way it saved Revan. Ben Solo comes back on nothing but memory and love freely given. And then he spends the last of himself pouring his own life force into Rey to bring her back from death and fades away having paid, at the very end, the highest price on the scale after all. So which is it, cheapest return or most expensive? And that's the trap he springs. He pays nothing to come back, and then everything to stay. The return costs him a decision. Staying costs him his life.
He touches the bottom rung and the top rung in the same handful of minutes. Exactly the way I told you Anakin does. Grandfather and grandson, the only two who span the entire scale. Which is when the scale I've spent 20 minutes building quietly falls apart in my hands. Because Ben Solo never paid the Order anything. No severance, no penance, no institution measuring his worth and taking its cut. He was never on the ladder to begin with. He came back through a door the Jedi swore didn't exist, using a key, love, memory, a father's name that isn't listed anywhere in their rules. And that forces a question I don't have a clean answer to, so I'll just hand it to you straight. If the deepest, cleanest returns in this whole saga, Ben and his grandfather before him, cost nothing to the Order and everything to the person, then maybe the price of return was never about the Order at all. Maybe we've been counting the wrong currency this entire time. Which means before we can total up the bill, we have to deal with the people who fooled us. The ones everybody swears came back and never paid a thing. The most romanticized, enlightened Jedi who saw the truth in all of Star Wars was never redeemed by anyone because he never came back. He went the other way, all the way, and died a Sith. And a huge slice of the fandom still talks about him like a tragic hero, Count Dooku. Say his name to the right corner of the internet and you'll get a sigh about the noble idealist. The Jedi who was too principled for a corrupt order. The man who left because he saw what the others refused to see. And the seductive part is that the first half is true. Dooku was a genuine Jedi master, one of the most respected of his age, trained by Yoda himself. He did grow disillusioned. He did watch the Order rot into an arm of a dying republic and decide he wanted no part of it. Right up to there, he sounds like Ahsoka. He sounds like Barriss with a better vocabulary. And then he knelt in front of Darth Sidious and took the name Darth Tyrannus, and spent the rest of his life engineering a war that killed billions to hand the galaxy to the Sith.
There's no scene where he flinches, no blade lowered, no bridge, no father's voice. He fell, and he stayed, and he died still reaching for more power. Betrayed by the master he'd betrayed everyone else to serve. You're defending him right now. Some of you are. And I want you to notice that the thing you're defending is the fall, not a return. You've mistaken a good reason for leaving the light with actually walking back into it. Those are not the same act. Dooku had the perfect excuse, and he still paid nothing to come home, because he never tried to come home. On our scale, he registers nothing, 0. He's not a low rung, he's not on the ladder. Compare him to a case with no romance attached at all. Pong Krell, a Jedi general in the Clone Wars who turned quietly, coldly, from the inside. No grand ideology, just a man who foresaw the Jedi losing and decided to switch to the winning side early. He deliberately fed his own clone troopers into slaughter, turned battalions against each other, and did it all while still wearing the robes and the rank. He fell without ever announcing it, and he died a traitor, executed by the very soldiers he'd betrayed. No flinch, no bridge. Nothing owed, nothing paid, no way back attempted. That's the point of holding these two up against everyone else. The scale doesn't just rank the ones who returned, it exposes the ones who didn't, no matter how good their reasons looked or how quietly they fell. A tragic backstory is not a down payment. Disillusionment is not redemption. Leaving the light with a broken heart still leaves you in the dark. Which means the thing that actually separates the returned from the lost was never the direction they walked or the reasons they had. It was whether they paid. And once you see that, you finally see what the price was really measuring. Line them all up. Shame, deed, body, mind, life. And something shows through that the individual stories hide. The dark side isn't a kind of power, it's a kind of debt. Look at what every return actually cost, side by side. Luke paid interest, a jolt of shame, because he'd barely borrowed anything. Barriss borrowed more and paid with a deed. Ulic borrowed deep, and the Force itself came to collect, took his connection at the root. Revan borrowed so much that the only way to clear the account was to erase the borrower. Anakin borrowed for 23 years, and the balance came due all at once, in a reactor shaft, and it took everything he had left. The pattern's the same every time. The deeper you go, the more you owe, and the debt does not forgive. It waits, it compounds, and one day it wants paying in the exact coin you can least afford. Your limb, your sanity, your life. That's what Yoda was really warning about on Dagobah, and I think even he only half understood it. Forever will it dominate your destiny. He heard that as a prison sentence. Go in, never come out. But that's not quite what the galaxy actually shows us. People do come out, the door does open. What Yoda got right is subtler and worse. The dark side dominates your destiny not by trapping you inside it, but by setting the terms of your exit. It decides what leaving will cost. You can always walk back into the light, you just never get to choose the price, and it's always higher than you'd have agreed to going in. Which reframes the light side too, and this is the part I keep turning over. We think of the two sides as a pair of powers, evenly matched, pick your color of lightning. They're not. The dark side gives you strength today and bills you tomorrow. The light side asks for the payment up front, the discipline, the patience, the letting go, and then it never comes for your body or your mind in the night. One is a loan shark, the other is a slow, honest wage. The Jedi weren't rejecting power, they were refusing to sign the contract. And that's the frame that finally makes sense of the man we started with. Because Anakin didn't just fall and come back, he was supposed to. The prophecy said the Chosen One would bring balance to the Force, and for that to mean anything, it required the fall first. His descent into the dark wasn't a detour from his destiny, it was the down payment on it. The most expensive return on the entire scale wasn't an accident or a tragedy the Force was trying to prevent. It was the Force collecting on the largest debt anyone ever ran up. And to see what he actually did in that reactor shaft, the thing I cut away from 20 minutes ago, you have to look at the whole bill at once. The mask comes off. We're back where we started, except now you can read the receipt. A dying man looks at his son with his own eyes. We opened on that image and I asked you to hold it. Here's what it actually was. Every other name on this list paid one currency. Shame, or a deed, or a limb, or a mind. Anakin Skywalker paid in two, at the two ends of the entire scale, and he paid them in the same 30 seconds. Watch it with the ledger open. When he picks up Palpatine and throws his own master down that shaft, the deed itself,
The single decisive act, a life taken to save a life. That's the second rung. The same coin Barriss paid, a Jedi turning on a Sith master. He buys his way back with one choice, the way the deed payers do.
But he doesn't stop at the deed, because the electricity that was killing Luke arcs back into him, and it's cooking him alive inside a suit that was already the only thing keeping him breathing. So he pays again, immediately, at the top of the scale, his life. The same instant as the return, the way it went for Ben Solo a generation later. Grandfather and grandson, the only two who ever spanned the whole ladder in a single scene. And there's the thing that sets him apart from every other name here. The reason his was the most expensive return of them all. The others fell by accident, or arrogance, or a mission that went wrong, and their return was them scrambling to undo a mistake. Anakin's fall was load-bearing. Remember the prophecy, bring balance to the Force. He couldn't fulfill it as the golden boy on the council. The balance required the fall, 23 years in the dark. The debt run all the way up, so that the return could be worth enough to matter. He didn't come back from being the villain despite the prophecy. He came back because being the villain was how the prophecy paid out. So when the mask comes off and he asks to look on his son with his own eyes, that's not a man being forgiven. That's a man watching the largest debt in the history of the Force settle in full, in real time, with the only currency big enough to cover it. He knows he's dying. That's the point. The look on that ruined face isn't fear. It's a man who has finally paid off the thing he's owed since he was 9 years old and made his first bargain with fear. He came back. It cost him everything. And unlike almost everyone else on this list, he'd have told you the price was fair. So was Yoda wrong? After all of it, after every name, every severed limb and wiped mind and life traded on the spot, was the old master simply mistaken when he said there's no coming back? No. That's the twist I want to leave you with. Yoda wasn't wrong.
He just didn't say the whole sentence. Once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. Every word of that held up. It dominated Ulic's destiny by taking the Force he came home to. It dominated Revan's by making the only cure a kind of murder of the self. It dominated Anakin's for 23 years and then built him his life on the way out the door. Not one of them escaped the domination. Every single one paid, and paid in the coin the dark side chose, not the coin they'd have picked. Yoda was right that the dark side never lets go for free. What he missed, what the whole order missed, staring at that one-way door for 1,000 years, is that you can never leave without paying is not the same sentence as you can never leave. They treated a toll booth like a wall.
And because they believed it was a wall, they wrote off everyone who fell as already lost, which is its own quiet tragedy. How many might have come back if anyone had bothered to reach for them? The way Ventress reached for Voss. The way a dying Han said Ben. The way a son threw down his lightsaber and refused to become his father. So here's the whole thing in one line. The line I've been building towards since the mask first came off. There is no free way out of the dark side. There never was. The only question, the one that separates a Luke from a Dooku, a returned Jedi from a lost one, is what you're willing to pay, and whether, when the bill finally comes, you're the kind of person who pays it. Which leaves one question we never touched, and it's the one underneath all of this. We spent this whole time measuring what it costs to get out. But nobody ever asks where the thing you're escaping actually came from. This hunger, this loan shark wearing the shape of a religion. Who built it? Where did the Sith come from in the first place? And why does the galaxy keep producing new ones no matter how many times the Jedi cut them down? That's a debt with a much older origin, and it's where we're going next.